Welcome to Ring the Damn Bell, man. I have a treat for everybody today. I have a man that has been a professional wrestler. He has been a manager with international success, an author, a DJ. The man is actually in 2010, he was inducted into the New England Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame. Kenny Casanova, thank you for coming on, my man. How are you?
And thank you for having me on. And right now, my ears are ringing, I think. Is that the name of the new podcast? My ears are ringing.
So the new name of the podcast, yeah, will be. I was going to mention that is that it comes July 1st. The name of the podcast is "Get Your Bell Rung," the
There it is.
professional wrestling podcast, and everyone. I have Kitty to thank for that name. I had come up with a name that I thought sounded pretty cool, but he came up with a better name. This is by who he is, and this is why only I am what I am.
Jeez, I
Uh,
get another writing credit here. I get to write a title.
Absolutely.
All
You know,
right.
funny story. I'm 52 years old. I've been watching wrestling since I was about 8, and
Me too.
I first met you on a post. You had responded to it. We started talking, and I'm like, why don't I remember this name? Why haven't I ever seen this guy in the ring? Oh, but I have. I discovered that what the territory area that I watched was the Mid South Wrestling and all the Southern, the Ladder Championship Wrestling. I was more familiar with you under a mask known as Kim, which was Kamala's manager. Um,
Oh,
correct?
you mean the kimchi gimmick?
Yeah, the kimchi gimmick. Yep,
Okay, so
absolutely.
not to be too what's the word? Self-deprecating, but there's been a handful of different kimchis. There's been a bunch of them. So I was one kind of more over in the Northeast, not mid South.
Okay.
And I didn't do the stuff that you probably saw. I would guess that was probably Jeff Dalton, I would think.
Okay.
So there's a couple different kimchis, yeah. And I'm known for doing some of the independents up in the Northeast. There was also Brooklyn Brawler. Steve Lombardi was the big
Mhm.
one people remember from WWE. There's another guy in Memphis. So there's been a handful of them. I even think that who's the guy with AEW? Prince Nana has
Chris
played it.
Dana?
Yep, he's
Yeah.
played it. There's been a handful of different guys. So when Kamala was
Wow.
doing it in the independents in the Northeast, they picked me to do it sometimes because I had a good costume. That was all the requirement that was needed.
Well, you just taught me
So
something. I did not
there you go.
know that Prince Nana was also
Yep. Yeah.
one of them as well. You know, since I've started doing this podcast, Kitty, one thing I found out about myself is I don't know as much about wrestling as I thought I knew
Sure.
because I'm constantly getting surprised. But I mean, you have been connected in either by management or some other ways with people like Luke Harper, Damien Sandow, King Kong Bundy, Nikolai Volkov, Public Enemy, Rock, Tim Brandy, Demolition. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. You've been very, very successful in this industry.
Yeah, so managing is a funny thing, especially growing up when I did. There was a lot less people in the business than there are now. So we were still kind of in a transition period, I would say early to mid 90s, where it was still a little bit protected, but people started to see that schools could make money. And then eventually, once the cat was out of the bag and WWE was more looking at the entertainment side of things more so than the wrestling federation that was charactered as being before, when they broke kayfabe. And then, just now everybody can get into wrestling pretty easy. If they got a little bit of money, they take a couple classes from whoever and they're in. But back then, I got to work with a lot of guys and it was neat. In the Northeast, I got to work with a lot of the older timers that I got to watch growing up, as they were in the twilight of their career. But I also got to work with a lot of new guys that were just starting out that didn't quite make it, but were going to make it soon. Some of
Right.
those guys I remember seeing Edge and Christian before they started wrestling. They were Sexton Hardcastle and Christian Cage. And then I worked with Let's see, the Jackal before he went to WWE, and he was called, uh, geez, what was he called? Johnny Flamingo? Was that his name? No, that's not right. But I worked with a number of guys, different, that were just coming up, and they've all since come and gone. Like I worked with Scott
Right.
Taylor, who went on to tag with Rikishi and started doing the Worm and all. And now he's
Yep.
retired. So I guess I'm
Yep.
pretty old.
You and I
So
both, my man. And I want to go into who Kenny is, the man. But before we get there, since we're talking about managers of professional wrestling, um, definitely back in the '80s, the '90s, there was a good bit of managers in professional wrestling. We've kind of seen that go away a good bit. Do you think that we will start to see a resurrection of managers in professional wrestling again, like we did back when?
I think we're seeing it in AEW to some degree, right? We
Right.
mentioned Prince
Yep.
Nana, and they've got a
Yep.
lot of guys there now that are kind of like the coaches, or
Mhm.
some of them are called managers. Um, WWE, they're not really grabbing that all that much. We had MVP for a period of time, but
Right.
mostly it was just Paul Heyman, right?
Yep.
And other than maybe a couple valets or recently, I don't know, maybe Chad Gable, but I don't know if you would call him a manager. But I would like to think so. I come from the old school mentality that I liked the mind behind the muscle and the guy that would talk on the mic, and then he could get beat up, but then he'd have his big guy protect him, and he would be, the person pushing the cheating and win any way you can, and throwing brass knuckles in, and distracting the ref. All those spots that if you did them now and you did them right, they would be new again because
Right.
people, the audience wouldn't recognize that stuff. And some of the best stuff is the old stuff, just kind of reinvented, right?
Oh, I
So
absolutely 100%. So tell me about Kenny Casanova, the person. What kind of childhood did you have? Um, at what point did you get into professional wrestling?
So my dad used to bring me out to all the wrestling shows out in Boston area. I used to live out in that way. And one show in particular, main event was Hulk Hogan versus Jesse the Body Ventura. I'll never forget it. I went there and I had watched all the wrestling shows, and I predicted, I said, when he rips his shirt off, he's going to throw it over there so the camera could get a shot. So, Dad, let me come down out of the cheap seats and let me go stand over there. I'm going to catch that wrestling shirt by Hulk Hogan. And he's like, whatever, kid, go ahead, do it. And I went down, and by damn it, I caught the wrestling shirt. I got it, and I still have it. It's on my wall over here. But I caught, and all these people jumped me, and security guards kind of like pulled it apart. And when the dust settled, I walked out of there with that wrestling shirt, and I'm carrying it's a white shirt. It says American made on it, and it's one of his old, like just
Mhm.
before he started the Hulkamania shirts, of the red and yellow, or right around the same time, probably a little
Right.
bit, but very early. So, and since then, I more and more into it, and eventually I was managed a comic book store in my college years, early college years. And one of the guys said, "Hey, I see there's a wrestling school opening up a couple hours from here. Why don't we go?" And I went with him, and then I met up with some other characters, and I learned how to wrestle, and I found I was really good with the microphone stuff, which would later parlay to storytelling more so, and being able to move it into book writing. Um, but yeah, so I did a lot of managing stuff, and like I said, I worked with some of the old guys that were on the independent scene that had been let go by WWE and working a lighter schedule on their own, under their own kind of accord, and also working with newer guys. So I got to work with, both old and new, and got a lot of experience that way. And I mean, if you want to fast forward and jump over the
Yep.
characters and stuff that I
Yep.
played,
Nope. Nope. Not yet.
okay,
Not yet. Because I
all
want.
right.
So what was the as a kid? What wrestling federation or promotion did you watch?
Mostly WWE, but before I saw a lot of world class. We
Okay.
got world class where I lived in Haverhill, Massachusetts. And from time to time, if I was lucky, my dad was a minister. I would sneak out during his sermon and I could see a little bit of Memphis randomly. And I don't even know how, but I think some channel here and there would throw some different syndicated stuff on from time to time. And while I was seeing King Harley on the race in WWE, there was another King, Jerry Lawler, and I'm
Mhm.
is blowing my mind figuring out, wow, and then I started looking at magazines and seeing that there were a whole lot different worlds out there. It wasn't just WWE or World Class, and pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So those were my two big ones, though: World Class and WWF.
Now, was there a particular wrestler that just really resonated with you, either good or bad, that just gave you that everlasting emotional feel of either happiness or angry that you just remember for the rest of your life? Like mine was Ted DiBiase with Eternal Junkyard Dog. I will forever remember that moment. Did you have any of those moments?
I think the whole rock and wrestling thing with Captain Lou Albano and Hulk Hogan and Cyndi
Right.
Lauper and Hogan introducing Hillbilly Jim, like right in that spot, rock and wrestling when it was
Yeah.
kicking into high gear with Wendy Richter and the whole deal and Roddy Piper. Um, that was probably the first big angle. But as far as relatable, believe it or not, I really liked Tito Santana back then because if you went to a live show, you didn't always get Hulk Hogan because he was going off to the big A card shows.
Right.
But the B cards and the C cards, that's where you saw, the next step down, which would be Intercontinental Champion. So Tito Santana was more like the real man's champion,
Mhm.
the worker champion. And I really like the Tito versus Greg the Hammer Valentine storyline, which was right around there with Rock and Wrestling, and that's where Greg beat him with the figure four, and then Tito came back. He learned the figure four and then used it against Greg to
Yep.
eventually win it back. So
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
I actually
probably the biggest one match that I could call that I really liked,
Yeah,
or
I
feud.
actually, I just had the pleasure of meeting Tito Santana a few weeks ago in St.
Super
Louis.
guy.
Oh
Yeah.
man, what a nice
Yeah.
guy! Very down to earth.
Sure.
So who trained you?
Uh, Good question. So I trained in around 94 at a school called USWF, so it's United States Wrestling Federation out of Elmira, New York, which is home of Mark Twain for any of you literate individuals out there, even though I know wrestling fans sadly do not often read. But anyhow, yeah, a handful of different people. So most remarkably known, maybe there was a guy named TC Reynolds along with Preston Steele. Preston Steele was sort of known as being enhancement talent to some degree on WCW at the time. But the cool thing about it was back then, USWF immediately started using their students to save on talent, which was good for us, but bad for indies in general because a lot of guys got on shows that probably shouldn't be, and they watered down things to some degree before they were ready. But I got to work and also learn from guys like Tom Brandy, a guy that trained Tom Brandy, King Kalua, who's still out there today, and he's awesome. Bam Bam Bigelow.
Mm,
Virgil came through, and Superfly Snuka was like on every show. So Superfly Snuka would show me some stuff and keep things real simple but make things big for the audience. So I got little lessons from all these guys. So it was pretty cool. I can't say that they trained me, but I was on shows with them and they showed me spots that I
right,
didn't know, like crazy things like Tennessee tiptoe, where you would run outside of the ring and a guy would chase you, you jump in the ring and you drop down, and another guy would jump over you, bounce back and forth, and then one guy would get up and get hit. That was called the Tennessee tiptoe, and I had seen it done before, but didn't would never dawned on me to do it until they showed me how to do it right. Things like that. So,
right. So who was your very first opponent when you were ready to get out there and go in the ring?
so let's see. You mean as a wrestler or as a
As a
manager?
wrestler. As a wrestler.
As a wrestler, so I did a lot of like battle royals and I did some tag teams and some things like that. I would say my first one was probably a battle royal that had all kinds of people in it. So I think Tito Santana was in that battle royal, believe it or not. It was pretty cool. As the kid in me, the 12-year-old,
Right.
is like, geez, Tito's right over there, strike force, baby. So I would say, yeah, he was in there. I did stuff with Brutus Beefcake early on. Um, Jeez, and then a lot of indie guys because usually when
Yeah.
I wrestled, I wasn't great. I was better on the mic and more of a manager. So, for recognizable names, um, yeah, my first couple of big matches probably had Bam Bam Bigelow or Virgil or the Bushwhackers. I can remember on the opposite side, things like that. So, but a lot of the times, I was a manager of names like King Kong Bundy and
Mhm.
geez, man, all kinds of different people that had recently left WWE. I remember managing Iron Mike Sharp and just
Oh
really
wow.
some crazy names, you know, that super cool that I got to work with.
Yeah.
Uh,
So, how long were you wrestling before you really got into management and kind of left wrestling alone?
so more so I would more I managed right off the bat and I wrestled some. So it was more like a Bobby Heenan
Okay.
situation. Yeah. But quite often I'd be in a battle royal or something to fill it out, or I might tag with the wrestler I was managing, things like that. So right from the beginning, I was Kenny Casanova, which was sort of like a Jimmy Hart, Tom Jones, Captain Lou Albano hybrid, if you could imagine such a thing. So
Yeah. Who was your first guy you managed?
let's see. So a guy named Danger and his tag team partner Hazard. They were called Damage Inc. and they were a tag team. And they went against the American Patriots, which were TC Reynolds and Preston Steele. So a couple of enhancement talent guys from WCW. Yep.
Uh, your first guy that you wrestled that would you would be considered a big dog in in wrestling.
Probably Bam Bam Bigelow would have been
Hey, man.
next, I think. Yep.
Yeah. How
Yeah.
was
And
it
he was
working?
great. Yeah, he was really cool. I remember one time it was funny with him. This was right as Hulk Hogan was about to turn heel and go NWO, but no one expected it. And we were talking about wrestling, and Bam Bam had done some stuff recently, I think with WCW. And I said to him, I said, "Do you think they'll ever turn Hulk Hogan heel? Because he's getting booed over there a little bit, and they spent all this money." And nah, he goes, "Kenny, I don't think so, man. They'll never turn that guy, heel. He makes too much money with the shirts." And the very next week, he had turned heel. And then I saw Bam Bam, and I walked in the locker room, and he looked at me, and he's like, "Man, shut up. I don't even want to hear it." He's giving me all this heat in the locker room. So, because we had just had the conversation, he was like, "Absolutely not," and then it happened. So.
How was it managing Nikolai Volkov? Because I met him in St. Louis as well, and he almost kind of destroyed my childhood because he spoke regular with an English accent. He didn't speak Russian and threw me off,
Yeah,
man.
yeah, you talk kind of like this when he's doing the act, the podcast when he was still with us, and but then we would kind of sound a little bit more without it, but he had a little bit, he was great to work with. In recent years, I still manage, by the way, and in recent years, I'm managing a Soviet, well, actually, I guess I'm the Soviet what would you call that, enthusiast,
Mhm.
um and I do Russian, I do the whole Russian gimmick, and really just steal from Nikolai Volkov for the most part, but it's a little bit of him and a little bit of Roddy Piper, I think. And I manage this pretty good sized blonde haired guy who does the whole Russian gimmick. He carries the new Russian flag, but I carry the old one. And uh as the story goes, I come out and I say to America that they're disgusting. They should learn from old Mother Russia. And I sing the Russian national anthem, and I do a pretty spot on Nikolai Volkov impersonation. And, I tell them that they have poor hygiene and COVID ended years ago, but it smells like to me that they're still treating it like there's a toilet paper shortage and they need to wipe more often. So I'm pretty colorful and disgusting. And when we go into the national anthem, uh, people boo, and that USA versus Russia thing is still as good as it was back then. Which again
Yeah,
feeds to the idea that old can be new, and the idea is we long for old Mother Russia to come back is sort of it. So
absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely. The Sid Bischoff said, "Rest in peace, Sabu," and we're going to absolutely get to Sabu in a bit. Uh, what was it like working with Jake Roberts? Because there is the good Jake Roberts, and then the crazy, I wouldn't say bad, but with a lot of problems, Jake Roberts. What Jake Roberts did you manage?
Let's see. So I actually was on the opposite side of him a couple of times, more so than managing him. Let me think if I managed him. I remember being opposite him, which
Oh
doesn't
yeah,
mean I didn't
actually,
manage him.
you had a preference. I misread that. You had an extensive wrestling feud with people like the Patriot, Tito Santana, and Jake Roberts. So what was it like, working with him in
Yes.
general?
So the first time I remember working with him, and this might make sense to the audience when I explain this, but I think it was at USA Power Pro. I can't tell you the date. It was a Chris Candido memorial show. So he had passed recently, and a great promoter named Frank Goodman booked me on the show. I managed. I want to say it was a managing King Kong Bundy. I was managing King Kong Bundy versus Jake the Snake Roberts. And back then, some of the older guys, they got to take it easy because they're older. And I think the idea was, well, let's make sure that people get to see the DDT. So the manager's going to take the finish. And I got in there, and Jake did not stiff me whatsoever. He hit me, made it look good. I went down, sold it, and all. And I think he put the snake on me too, as I recall. Is that right? I've had the snake on me, but I don't remember if it was that show. But anyhow, yeah. So that Jake was fine. He was fine to me, and everything was cool. I know soon after that he did Legends of Wrestling pay-per-view with a buddy of mine who was a referee named Todd Taylor, who's an awesome ref. And that's the one where he took the snake out and he was holding it up to his crotch and acted all crazy. And soon after that, some addiction issues we hear. But none of that came to fruition when I worked with him. He was always good.
Yeah, I think Jake, he doesn't get the credit he deserves when it comes
Oh,
to
sure.
with promos, especially.
Yeah. Yeah.
He kind of set the pace or the bar for being able to do these promos without yelling and screaming, and but so yeah, definitely
Real dark
love it.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I've hit him up a number of times. He'd be a dream book. If I could write another book with one of the guys from that era, he would be like one of my first choices. I've asked him a number of times, and I know he's worked on some with himself and other people, and everything has fallen apart. It just hasn't happened yet. I hope maybe one day we could make it work. I was actually pushing his daughter to do it too. Cheryl books him a lot now, his daughter, or that's his ex-wife's
Wife.
name.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever his daughter's name is. I can't think of it right now. My bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Uh, we mentioned the, Santana a few times. You were able to work with Tito Santana in the ring. You've had feuds with him. Was
sure.
that your dream come true?
It was pretty cool. Yeah, I mean, I remember one of them, we did this thing where I was in a group we called the Brazilian Hug Squad, which was just ridiculous. We all went to a Marshall's. We bought this Brazilian, I think maybe it was a no, it's soccer jacket. It was like yellow with the colors of green and all and black. I had the flag on it, and me and two other guys, a few other guys. Buttery Burt played it. A guy named Sweet Pete played it. Uh, Timmy Z played it. So Miss DeVille played it. So there was a handful of us, but I was the manager of all of them. We dressed bright yellow and all, and we did a match. One of my guys, I don't remember who it was, but one of them was fighting Tito Santana at some place out in the boons with where there's farms and everything. When we pulled up, I looked out and I saw in a cage a big goat, a big, nasty, ugly looking goat. And there was a guy feeding it. And I said to him, I was like, hey, dude, can we use that goat at the wrestling show tonight? He's like, what? And I'm like, listen, man, you can be the official handler. We'll give you a jacket. Can you put that thing on a leash and let us walk it out to the ring? Because if you remember back in the day, Coco Beware had that bird, Frankie.
Yeah.
He had the bird, and I mean, even Ricky the Dragon had some kind of big ass iguana that he brought to the ring with him, and Jake the Snake had his, Damien and Revelation, uh, British Bulldogs had Matilda, right? So they
Yeah.
had all that stuff going on, and I'm like, wouldn't it be cool to a Brazilian to have a goat, some that? So we convinced the guy to do it. Right. And I'm like, this is the best thing ever. So he calls it the Brazilian Hug Squad. So you picture we come out, we would run down, we're heel, right? Sort of like goofy heel, like Rougeau brothers, and we would hug the audience members and they would be like, get away from me, and all. But so now we got the goat in the mix and it just looks crazy. So we're getting him out to the ringside and my guy's wrestling Tito Santana in the ring, and I can't even enjoy it because what's happening is, and we didn't expect this freaking goat started headbutting everybody he could in the nuts. He headbutted the referee in the nuts. He headbutted me in the nuts. He headbutted Tito when Tito got out of the ring. The thing just went crazy for
Mm.
low blow headbutts. And I'll never forget. I think we called him Hoot Nanny, but we never used Hoot Nanny again. That was a one-time mascot deal.
That's awesome. Oh, so I also know that you were involved in a show put together for Captain Lou Albano, and in that show there was a splash done by King Kong Bundy that the ring fell apart.
Okay, yeah, that's two different shows. So the
Is
Captain
it
Lou Albano show, yeah, that
leading to the
actually, and
internet?
I mentioned that thing with my dad. That was like, well, the Hulk Hogan thing. I was young. I was like 12 or 13. That was 1980. 84, I think. So the Captain Lou Albano thing was 88. So that was another
Okay,
4 or 5 years later. I was a senior in high school, and they were going around doing a multiple sclerosis fundraiser. And Captain Lou, I think, had recently either retired from WWE or was just doing some indie stuff here and there, but also making little appearances. But he was babyface because later in his career, he had started being more of a nice guy and real person, so they had to turn him kind of a good guy in TV. So, and this was one of the reasons why that happened. He started doing fundraiser shows, and I sold some tickets for that show, and then I got to eat chicken wings with all the wrestlers at the end at an after party, and that's when I hung out with Captain Lou Albano for an hour or two, and he told me about becoming a manager,
mhm,
and that's when he kind of turned me on to it a little bit. And it took
okay,
me a couple of years to find my way to wrestling, but that was the first time.
right.
Um, that other show you're talking about with King Kong Bundy, that was in
Seven.
'97 when I actually started promoting shows in the upstate New York area. So I was in
Mhm.
Schenectady, New York, and King Kong Bundy was wrestling a guy named Primo Canera the Third, this big, huge 7 foot guy, legit
Yep.
7 foot. And the thing with Primo, though, people might remember him as being Big Guido, so Little Guido's big brother,
Mm,
I think, in ECW, right? So some people might remember him. But they both jumped in the ring in the same spot at the right time, and it legit collapsed and it went down. And I was promoting the show, and people didn't know it, so I was a bad guy in the show, sort of like. This is random, but sort of like Vince McMahon was running the show as a commentator, but he wasn't known as
right,
being. So I had to come out and fix the deal because at the end of that show, we had promised the crowd that we were going to have a big battle royal to crown the new champion. And the ring is broken, and there's no way to get everyone in the ring. And this was 96, 97.
like seven.
And I said, I just got on the mic and said, I was just talking to the commissioner in the back, and he told me to come out here and let you all know we're going to do a reverse battle royal. And I just made it up on the spot. And I told the guys to run out and fight outside of the ring, and the first one who got into the broken ring would then be the champion. And it was supposed to be someone else, but it was so chaos. And at some point, Iron Mike Sharp just, I think, jumped in the ring and he won the title. The promotion at the time, we called it New Breed Wrestling. He won the title, and that's the way they end show. And they got their battle royal, and everyone was happy and all. But the reverse battle royal thing, that was in '97, and then they did it again. Someone else did the same idea in TNA, but it was much later. It was like I want to say 92 or 93. And that's the first one in magazines that seemed to go on record, but we did it out of necessity, not out of a gimmick. It like just kind of fell together.
Right,
Kind of a
right.
funny story. Yeah.
Yeah, and I apologize for getting those two. Whenever you're doing
No, that's
research, I'm
fine.
at the mercy of the internet, and
Sure.
sometimes they get
Yeah,
stuff
no problem.
wrong. Uh, Before we get into you writing the books that you've written, uh,
Sure.
tell us some stories, because I know you have to have some great wrestling stories.
You mean as a manager then?
Manager,
Yeah.
wrestler, whatever. No
Okay.
ribs.
So, one that I've told recently that might be a neat story to tell now might be one time we did a show for Mike Sparta, whose brother was a referee for WWE, Freddie Sparta. He ran a promotion in Quincy in Boston area, and they were in Vermont, and I was managing up in Vermont Brody Lee. Who before he was Brody Lee, he wore a purple pimp jacket with me, and we came to the ring looking all crazy, like lounge lizard kind of thing, and and that would kind of lead to that idea of me having interaction with some of the younger guys before they got into the bigger time. But also on that show, I managed a guy named Don Vega, and Don
Uh-huh.
Vega was a great Puerto Rican wrestler who was being asked to play a secret D'Lo Brown character that night, which doesn't really make any sense. So the promoter goes up to him and he says, "Hey, Vega, why don't you be pretend to be D'Lo? We couldn't get him tonight, so we want you to put this mask on and call yourself Mr. D, and everybody will think that he's been suspended but back, and that way they'll think that he's still on the show, even though I couldn't get him tonight." Real shady kind of deal. So he's like, brother, I don't mind doing it, but he's like, I'm Puerto Rican, I'm not black. So she's like, it don't matter. They're not going to see your face. Just come to the ring and shake your head like this. So he agreed. So I managed Don Vega versus Sabu, and his manager on the outside of the ring was Alfonso, Bill Alfonso.
Yep. Met
And
him
that was
too.
great for
Great
me.
guy.
Yeah, it's super cool. Yeah. And funny thing is, I don't know if you remember this. For a period of time, Sabu, he had like he was taking this supplement, and it was a protein supplement or something. It was sort of jiving with his stomach, and he would sometimes throw up in matches. I don't know if you remember. There's just a short time, maybe a year or so. He did like a TNA appearance, and he
Yeah.
puked, and a couple, they were like, "What the hell? He's puking in matches and stuff." And it really, I can't stress this enough. It had nothing to do with booze or anything like that. He was
Mhm.
taking a weird supplement that didn't jive with him while he was trying to get a little bigger so he could get a protein stuff. Um, and anyhow, he came to the show. He was wrestling on a full stomach, and he had this whey protein stuff that would bloat him. He picked up Vega, Don Vega, body slammed him, and right as he did it, he barfed, and it went right into Don Vega's mouth, right in his mouth. It could have went anywhere. Could have hit him on the chest. Could have hit the mat next to him and had him look over, but no, it had to go in his mouth. So Vega's like, he's spitting it out, and he rolls out of the ring, and then it's like, okay, now the fun is, the joke is on you. So I'm cracking jokes like, chunks count anywhere match. Did that move leave a bad taste in your mouth? And everyone's trying not to lose it, both from barfing or laughing, right? And the refs throwing crazy stuff in there too. I think that joke was in poor taste. Just gross stuff like that. But by the end of the night, we go to the back, and Sam goes, "Oh, brother, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. I'm really sorry." He's like, "All right, sorry." And I said, "Sabu, what did you have for dinner?" And he's like, "The cheeseburger sub and a banana milkshake." And then I turned from him over to Don Vega and I said, "So how did it taste? Was it good?" Like I was still in the mid conversation with Sabu, but looked at the guy that actually was eating his dinner secondhand. You know, so
Oh,
it's funny when I ended up working with Sabu, we put that book we put that story in the book, and Don Vega had a little guest passage and got to comment in there, and pretty cool.
that's awesome. Scotty W told me to ask you about his good friend Scott Scarsdale.
Oh, I know who this must be then. I wouldn't say that's good. There's an indie guy locally that was arrested for child pornography recently. That was the promoter that happened with. And he's away for 8 years. So acquaintance is a better word than good friend. He never was
Right?
considered a good friend until I knew that happened. So now you want to distance yourself a little bit. Hopefully I answered that politically as well as I could.
Man, this is not a PC podcast, so you can
All
say
right.
whatever you want.
Yep.
You and I might be wrong. Did you write Just Incredible's book or attempt to write one for him?
Oh
Uh,
no, yeah, it's out. Yep.
is not
Yeah.
what was that experience like working with him on
So I
with
want to
that for
tell
the
you,
book?
addiction's a bitch, man. I feel bad for the guy because he had some issues and he wrote about it in the book. But at the time, he had both himself and me fooled because we thought he was doing well. And there was a positive message by the end of the book that he thought he was on the road to recovery and he had already hit rock bottom, and bottom and stuff was good. DDP had reached out to him. They were going to do a
Mm,
documentary together. They had already started working on it. He was very forward in the book. He didn't pull any punches. He talked about, hitting people up for $50 and actually wanting to used that for a fix rather than lying to them, saying he needed grocery money because he was down and out, because the addiction had wiped him out. Now he's in a poor place. But there were a lot of issues, you know. I really like that book. I think it's super good. Unfortunately, there were some issues at the end. Maybe you saw with Maven
Mhm.
asking about, you know, and they went over some of that. Uh, he got in over his head. He was taking a bunch of pre-orders when he shouldn't have even been doing that, because the publishing company, my company, was going to exclusively do pre-orders, but
Mhm.
he started taking pre-orders on the side, in text messages, and didn't ever mail anything out. You know, he told Maven the reason was is he didn't have the postage. He had already blown it all. You know, maybe addiction reasons and things like this.
Right.
And I think there's some truth to that, but I also think maybe he was working some people too, because he could be carny.
Mhm.
That's the best thing I can say. But the other thing is, working with him, he's also, on a personal level, the most thankful and grateful and appreciative individual. So when you're talking to him, he's very complimentary. You know, I'm asking him, he's, oh, nobody asked me those questions before. He's like, you're really good at this. Like, and he makes you feel good. Like, he's really good at that. But at the same time, you know, he went from a case of being in the limelight, being the spotlight of ECW, and also being an honorary member of the Clique in WWE, and also, you know, running around the world with WWE, to going to the independents, not having any uh, medical insurance, and then that led him to needing to find pain pills on his own, and then that led to, as a gateway, to worse stuff to get rid of pain, and then his life spiraled out of control. And I hope the best for him now. I hope he's got stuff better under control. But yep, he screwed a lot of people out of some money, and you know, I feel bad. I will say this though, good karma. I tried to fix the stuff the best I could. Every person that got a hold of me that showed that they never got a book when they pre-ordered from him, you know, uh, I mailed him a promo book for free out of my pocket and
Yeah.
tried to make things good. So hopefully that was the right thing to do, and I think it was.
Yeah. You know,
S-
I'll say this about Justin, because I had him on my podcast a few months ago, and
okay.
it was a train wreck.
Ah,
He came on so high, passed out twice. But
ah,
I think that there's a lot of people, if they hear the name, automatically they say piece of shit, and that's
mm,
wrong.
yep.
Because I talked to the guy a couple of times before doing the podcast with him. He is extremely nice. He
Yeah,
is
he really is.
he's very appreciative. And I'll go as far. I don't know a lot of people is going to disagree with me. I'll go as far as saying that I know a lot of people got screwed over. I really don't think that his heart of hearts he meant to screw anybody over. Just addiction's a bitch, man.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
when you're addicted to stuff, you do things that you
Yep.
normally would never do.
Right.
And
And
yeah,
I
I
never
just I
slam
don't
him,
know.
you know, I never slam him on a
Right,
podcast because I know he's got these issues and stuff like this. And the best
right.
I could do was to take a bunch of books and mail them out to people and try to make them happy the best I could. He offered other things with some of his deals, his little combo deals, like a free shirt with a purchase of a book,
Mhm.
or like masks he didn't have that I was using pictures of for prizes. You know, whatever I could give him, I did. I tried, you know, but for the most part, they got a free book. And I hit him up. I found him at an autograph signing. He signed a bunch of labels for me, so I actually got a lot of autograph
Nice.
books out where I could, you know. So
Right,
I
right.
made good with a lot of guys, but there were some sour grapes, and you know,
Definitely.
did the best I could.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm like you. I mean, there's nothing more that than I would love than to see a podcast with him on it, and it's truly a comeback podcast where he truly is clean. I wish nothing but the best for him.
sure.
Something that, and we're going to go over the nonfiction books you've written, but you've actually written fiction books. You helped Cactus Jack, the Cactus Jack and the Beanstalk book in
Yeah.
2019. Demolition on Mars, Sabu versus the Three Little Pigs. Uh, Tell me about each of these projects and how did they develop, especially the Sabu versus the Three Little Pigs.
Yeah. So we're at WrestleCon. Picture this, in New York City, and I meet up with a guy. mutual friend, her name is Liz Savage, introduces me to the guy who draws the little comic book strips in Joe Bazooka Gum. You know Bazooka Gum? Yeah.
Yep.
So
Yep.
the guy that currently does that, and he's also Rob Zombie. There's a wrestler named Ron Zombie, and I thought I said that for a second. Rob Zombie, he did like promotional stuff for him with the Frankenstein movie. He's got a coloring book out for him now. This was after our projects though. He did Batman, the Lego movie. Like he worked on that. So
Yeah.
this guy is kind of known. He's a great artist. His stuff's really
Mhm.
cool. I'm sitting next to him, and I gave him. Just I think the Vader book. Yeah, we were promoting the Vader book at the time, and I was like, we should work together. We should do something. Maybe you could draw, a comic book or something. We came up with the idea, let's do a coloring book for make it a little bit more adult, make it not more attitude era like. So first one we did was Cactus Jack and the Beanstalk, but it didn't start like that. Now I'd been touring around with Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and he was doing stand-up comedy, and I was helping promote that with him, and I helped fine-tune it a little bit with him. I would open his shows, and I had my own stand-up act, and I did like an impersonation of the Muppets meeting Grape Ape, who was in jail trying to get bail money from Kermit. And I did, it would be, hey, Piggy, who's on the phone? Grape Ape, Grape Ape. Like, and I just do all these goofy voices and stuff. But so Hacksaw Jim Duggan would come out and he'd do a whole bunch of stuff on Andre the Giant and stuff. And I said, hey, I just met up with Pete Bregman and we want to do a coloring book. And he said, hey, Kenny, I think that'd be a good idea. I think we should do it. Let's do it. So we were going to do Hack in the Beanstalk. But when it came done, it was too attitude era for him. He's like, "Oh, Kenny, I don't know. It's too what do they call it? Is it blue? Is that dirty comedy? It's too blue for me." And I'm like, I get it. So in the middle of the night, I text Cactus Jack and I say, "Hey, we started a coloring book. Would you be interested in flipping that over to you?" And he's like, "Yeah, I think that'd be cool." And we flipped it. It became Cactus Jack and the Beanstalk, and then it came out, and it was pretty cool. And then did the same thing for Sabu. We stuck with the idea of wrestlers and fairy tales. And then by the time it got to Demolition, it was more of like a Pulp Fiction thing. So it was like taking all of the sci-fi like crazy stuff that you would see in old 50s and 60s comic books, sort of like Back to the Future when
Mhm.
when Marty McFly's looking at his comic book, sort of like that. And we worked all of Demolition's stuff all into one funny thing where they go up to Mars and they're fighting these kung fu zombie Snuka clone cyborgs that have attacked their ship, and it's just crazy nonsense, but it's really cool. And they've got a cosmonaut chimpanzee named Fuji with them, so they still kind of have their manager, Mr. Fuji, and all. Good fun, and then the Sabu thing was the same thing. Sabu versus the three pigs, except he's the big bad wolf, but he's babyface, and all the pigs are heels, and they stole hit
That's
the
awesome.
tires off his RV, and he's going to their trailers and trying to get his tires back, and he meets up with pig versions of wrestlers like Bam Bam Bigelow and the Pig Show and stuff like that. And, yeah.
So you mentioned Mr. Fuji. Did you have the opportunity to meet him and get to know him at all?
Not really know him. I met him. I did a couple appearances with him early on where I would say this was, I want to say early 2000s, and he was doing some very early Comic Con type appearances before it became a big thing, before WrestleCon and all of that. And think Beefcake might have introduced me to him, if I recall. He was at one. I got pictures with him and stuff and talked to him, and he told me a couple of funny things that he used to do and all. But then working with a lot of the wrestlers, I got more of those stories. Like Fuji was insane. Like one of his big jokes is he would be in a hotel with you, at the bar, and you might be sitting at the bar, and he would just kind of free himself underneath the bar and just start urinating, and you wouldn't know it until you look down, and then you might run away. Or I think Tito was the one who said, brother, I was at a bar with him one time, and you're talking to him, and then all of a sudden you look and he's peeing in a potted plant next to you, and you run away. So like that, he had gross sense of humor like that.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of stories about him. I kind of put the cart in front of the horse when we talk about your writing because I wanted to ask you, how did you get into writing? I mean, how did you go from wrestling, managing, and then writing? Is this a talent you always knew you had, or
So, okay, so much like George the Animal Steel, like Tito Santana, you look for another thing to do when wrestling's not going to be there all the time for you. And I became a teacher. So I became an English teacher
oh,
and I learned
my
really, how to
daughter,
teach.
my
Okay. Yeah.
daughter's going to college to be an English teacher.
Nice. Okay.
Awesome.
Nice. So,
Uh,
yeah, so you teach writing and, I learned from teaching. I was sort of like the welcome back Cotter of English teachers for a bit at our local Votech. This is early 2000. And I taught the quote bad kids that didn't do well in a traditional setting. And this was their last chance to get a diploma. In a lot of cases, I would read books to them. And I started really picking up the fact that they didn't pay attention until I started doing the dialogue. So, say that I'm reading of Mice and Men. If I just read it how it was there, they might pay attention, but if I put it in voice, they started to like pay more attention. So, um, for instance, hey George, I like ketchup on my beans, said Lenny. But we ain't got no ketchup, George. But if we did, I would give it all to you. That's cool. They'd start listening though because they hear there's talking. But if I did it in voice, hey George, I really like ketchup on my beans, but we ain't got no beans, George. George said. I start doing the voices like that, and that's when I came to realize a good writing style that this younger generation that are easily distracted and like storytelling and fast cuts by MTV and all this has really impacted now the internet and then cell phones. They need a lot of entertainment. Um, when I started putting my first books together, I used that storytelling skill that came from using lots of dialogue and easier words, and also trying to find the fun in everything. So that kind of became my writing style. So when I had heard that Kamala had lost both legs to diabetes, I talked to him and said, "Hey, you want to do a Kickstarter? Maybe we could get together." And help you pay medical costs after playing kimchi for him, some of the independents, and Kenny, that sounds like a good idea, And I had been working on a sci-fi book, and I didn't have it out yet, but I told him my ideas and how we would do it, and he liked it. And he had me call Coco Beware up, who was his best friend, and Coco said, Kenny, I think if you do it, you want to do it right, and you want to make sure that this, you're treating him, and this really is a fundraiser for him, and you're not trying to screw him because he's been screwed by all these promoters. And I said, I'm going to do my best. And we put it out. And man, the Kickstarter made something like 20 grand. And that led to a GoFundMe that made him another 100 grand. And we put that book out that made him money for a long time and really helped out. So that transitioned to more projects. I did Beefcake and Danny Davis. And then I did Vader and Sabu. And then I got to do Tito's and I did Just Incredible. And um, every once in a while you blink and go out. I don't know if you can still hear me or not. I lose you
yeah, I
for
can
a
hear you.
second, but
Yeah, I can hear
yeah.
you. Yep.
I started doing a bunch of Ken Patera, there's a guy out from your end at neck of the woods, and
Yep.
did ODB, who's also from your neck of the
Yep.
woods,
Yep.
and
Met
uh
ODT quite a few times.
yeah, yeah.
Very free.
And
Matter of
working
fact,
on oh yeah.
ODB has a food truck now, barbecue food truck,
Have you
and
had it? Have you
oh,
had her food?
so good,
Oh, all
so
right.
good. Yeah,
How
absolutely.
often are you close enough you get there once in a while? Have you done it a couple of times?
Her food truck.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. She's
Yeah.
I live in a smaller town here in Minnesota, and we always have events in downtown, which is walking distance from my house, and
Oh,
she's always out there, always out there.
if you
Food truck.
can, when you see her, tell her you had me on because like
Okay.
we became great friends after writing her book. It was funny because she wouldn't have been my first choice, but she had a great story. Typically, and she fulfills this, but I have a formula when I pick somebody's project and take it on. They have to have been main event, they have to have had TV experience, and they have to have been on some kind of pay-per-view. And had international tours. Like that's kind of like what I look for.
Right.
And she had all of that stuff, you know. But usually when you think women wrestling, you think of WWE, I probably would have thought of, I don't know, who knows, Ivory or someone like that,
Right.
or Victoria or someone, you know. But randomly, Mick Foley writes me one day, emails me, and he says, "Hey Kenny, you got any projects out there? ODB recently had some problems. Her food truck burnt down,
Mm-hmm.
and you know she had left and put all of her eggs into that basket, and now she's got nothing. If you think about maybe doing a book project with her, I think that'd be cool. You know, and I'm not gonna say no to Mick Foley, so that was the next book I started working on, and you know we got to know each other, and she was just great. She was fun to write with, and we put a book out, and I'm super proud of it.
Yeah,
So.
she's a really really nice lady. She really is. So I definitely want to get to the book that you wrote with Sabu. Um, how did that begin, and how was it working with Sabu? And did you keep in touch with Sabu until he passed?
Yep. Yeah, yeah. So, uh, let's see, how did it begin? Uh, Melissa Coates was his girlfriend, and she was looking for someone to write a book for him, with him, because he really could not do one on his own. I don't know if you ever saw his Twitter. Basically, he wrote sentences that were 2 or 3 words long. He abbreviated words with abbreviations nobody knew, but they were close. Like he would write like right on. He would spell it RTON, period. That's how we were.
Right.
You know, he would use three semicolons, for, I don't know. I think they might have been explanation marks, but I don't know. His grammar was atrocious, and he talked like a caveman. So there's no way he was going to be able to do it his own. Her best friend Melissa Coates, was Beth Kemp, who did some managing on the Independents. Knew me, said I just did a bang up job for Kamala, and did Beefcake and Danny Davis's, and is currently working on Vader. Maybe you could do Sabu's, and I said yes, I'll do it. So got to working with Sabu. He was great. Um, you know, recently we did lose him, and RVD was mourning. I don't know if you heard any of this. Some people heard this, but he said, Kenny didn't get the voice right, but it was a conscious thing. When we put that book together, I said to him, we could do it exactly how you write, but it would be 10 pages long, you know, and it would sound like Captain Caveman's reading it to
Right.
everybody, you know. So we said, well, let's add history to it. Let's make it a little funnier in places. Let's, you know, but when he speaks and he does the dialogue in a story where he's talking to RVD, or he's talking to Bill Alfonso about getting his arm ripped off in a barbed wire match, the dialogue there, we tried to really make it still sound like Sabu's voice. So there's some
Mhm.
historical backdrops. RVD didn't like that. He slammed me for a bit, but man, I'm not gonna shit talk RVD, because I'm a big fan of RVD's, and I understand where he was coming from with that. And we've since then, I think, buried the hatch, and everything's cool, and he gets why we were doing that and stuff. And plus, you know, it was more mine and Sabu's vision for the book. He wasn't involved, you know. He did a
Right.
forward, uh, which was another point of contest there. I used the word literally in there somewhere, and I shouldn't have. He hated it, and I've since taken it out of the book. It's not in there anymore. But back then he read that, didn't get back to me some edits for his forward. Didn't hear from him again 8 years later when Sabu died. Now he says he didn't like something, and you know. But I get it. He just lost his buddy, and didn't like the book that he hadn't read recently. He says he's read it. Now he likes it. He says it's not as bad as he thought it was, and everything's cool.
Good.
So I'm happy to hear him and I were texting back and forth. I was like, dude, I'm on your team, man. I feel bad that you know, you lost your friend, and also that, you know, I let you down with throwing some words in there. Unfortunately, it went to print before he ever looked at it, and gave you the opportunity, but maybe it fell through the cracks. Sorry, I put that word literally in there. You know, kids use it a lot now, and I hate it. But back
Mhm.
then, I threw it in maybe to give him a certain voice that he didn't appreciate. And I get it. You know how a lot of kids will say, I literally walked down the hall and I literally saw this. And then, you
Mhm.
know, I used it in one place like that, and I shouldn't have, and I wouldn't today, 10 years later. So, but we're cool now. I
Yeah.
texted him and I said, hey, man, back in 1994, I saw you in Lost Battalion Halls in Queens, New York, and you were wrestling some lion guy back then. I didn't know who the heck you guys were. Turns out that was Chris Jericho, and you guys
Yeah.
tore it up. And I could not believe what I was watching. And I went to my wrestling school and said, "You guys are gonna have to step it up. You wouldn't believe the stuff I saw these guys doing." We started looking up, finding tapes, and and we saw some Jericho stuff, and we saw some RVD and some Sabu then, and
Mhm.
then ECW started coming on the air, and we started watching that, and so I was a fan of his. So when I heard he was bummed that I used the word literally and maybe added some words in there that Sabu wouldn't say, but they say we're all good now, so I'm happy.
Good, good,
Did
good.
you had you heard some of that? I thought maybe you might ask me about that, but
No, actually, I barely heard any of
okay.
that. I was
Yeah.
going to ask if there was any type of heat because of something with the book,
Yeah.
but I couldn't go
Yeah.
into detail about it.
Yeah.
Is there anybody's biography that you would just absolutely love to help them write?
Well, so the Jake the Snake would be cool. I don't think it's gonna happen though. I have a feeling that he might babyface people who ask about it and lead them on to the idea that a book could still be happening someday. Or sometimes I've heard him say, "Brother, I've already got 1,000 pages written. It's already ready to go." Different things like that. But I kind of don't think it's out there, but maybe it is. I'd like to do Jake the Snake, though. I think that'd be awesome. Um, Maybe a new Jim Duggan book, and we're pretty friendly, so maybe it could happen. We talk about it every once in a while. And uh, who else have I said that I'd like to do in the past? Uh, Geez, I don't know. I'm working possibly we might have a Rikishi book in the works. So we actually laid out the whole thing and figured it out, but neither of us had the time to really get good interviewing going down. So it hasn't exactly happened yet, short of a few calls and laying some things out. So his would be a really cool one, especially with the bloodline and all that stuff
Yeah.
popular right now. But I am finishing up the Greg the Hammer Valentine book. So it's
Awesome.
done. The draft, yeah, draft exists. And I'm polishing it up, trying to find the funny in it where I can and make it a little more funny, and trying to cut out extra words, which has been uh, a little difficult because he repeats himself a bit sometimes, and then I would tend to write some of that. And now I got to go back and take some of it out and find easier, quick ways to say it. That's
Yeah.
actually something I stole from Jerry Seinfeld. If you ever listen to Jerry Seinfeld explain the way he writes punchlines,
Mhm.
he says he tries to write them with the least amount of syllables as possible. Then he goes back and reads the line and sees if he can take even more words out. And that means hitting fast and making it quick and good delivery. So um, yeah. Another good guy to write maybe would be like Fred Ottman,
Mm.
Shockmaster, or
Yep.
Tugboat
Tugboat.
Typhoon. He'd be a good one to write because he's seen a lot of it. He was around during that time, the golden age of wrestling. And he was in WCW. He did different gimmicks and
Yep.
all. And the good thing about him is he's a hustler, right? Some people say maybe be a little older, at old age, but he's out doing comic cons and he's promoting things, and he's great. So he might be another one that would be cool to do.
Yeah, super nice guy. Um,
Yeah.
if you wrote your own biography, what would be the ending to how would you end your own biography?
Geez, see, that's a tough one. For one, I don't meet my own requirements. So I'd have to make it slide because I know a guy, I guess. But funny thing too, we can jump back to Sabu for a
Yeah.
second. We were writing Sabu's book. We got to the end and he wasn't retired yet. He's still out doing independence and stuff when we're writing this, putting this together back in 2017 or so. And he says, "Well, I don't want to just say that's the end. So how do we end it? How do other guys end their books?" He says to me. And I'm like, "Well, a lot of times they just say thank you or they do shout outs. They thank their friends or thank the fans." He's like, "Ugh. Well, let's do the opposite of that." I'm like, "What the heck is the opposite of that?" And he's like, "Well, let's tell a bunch of guys to F off and and go screw themselves." And I'm like, "All right." So we wrote a funny ending. That might have been some of the heat you might have heard of me too on that book. He came up with it. I
Yeah.
swear to God, he came up with it. And he kind of mocked Kurt Angle because he didn't like working with him that much. And he's like, "You,
You know
sir, I can
why?
do with it." Uh, I did, but I don't remember. I think maybe. Kurt Angle was stiff with him somewhere and he didn't like it, or something simple, something not a big deal. I don't really remember exactly what it was. But like he slammed a couple. He really didn't like Test though. That was the guy he didn't like the most wrestling. Test was like a jerk to him, I think. But I couldn't tell you why really. Sometimes just guys don't jive, you know.
Mhm.
Who else did he say? Oh, and he didn't like. Oh yeah, he shit on JR a little bit, and this is the reason why. I guess JR had promoted something show for WCW where the Sheik came back, did some stuff out their way in Detroit, and owed him a lot of money in the Sheik's mind. So he felt that WCW never made good with a payday for that. He was supposed to get some kind of taste of the show, you know, a percentage
Mhm.
of tickets, and
Mhm.
didn't get that. He just got like a payday and that was it. So he said that, you know, JR's was a bastard because he owed his uncle money. And he slammed him in the book. And then when the book finally came out, he had second thoughts. Sabu was like, shit, I shouldn't have done that because he's now in AEW and he's calling some shots. Early on, JR was kind of calling
Right.
some shots. He's not much now, but he was. And it was too late. Book was already printed. He's like, Kenny, can you pull out of there? I can do that now because the technology has changed where we could print up one book in Japan and then it goes to a guy who orders it in Japan. Like I could just go in and change it and then bang, you could do that.
Well,
Yeah, it's really Amazon has gotten crazy with what they can do, man. Crazy. We could have a whole podcast on that. But back then I couldn't do that yet. And so I said, well, if you want, Sabu, I'll call JR up because he wrote a forward for Kamala's book and I got a contact on him and he was cool with me. So I called him, I said, dude, I'm sorry. You know, Sabu said some stuff. He's like, oh, I've heard that story before. He's like, that's unfortunate. I really didn't play the part that he thinks I did. He's like, but thanks for the heads up and tell him no hard feelings or whatever. And Sabu finally did get his day in AEW and got
mhm.
to show up at some point. So that was great that he did get to get that to happen before we lost him. So, but we made good with that, you know. But that funny section at the end, the FU shout outs, some people have talked about on other shows like the Jim Cornette show and stuff. Totally Sabu's idea. He's innovative, you know, as you know, coming up with, and he wanted to do the opposite of thanking people and doing shout outs at the end. He wanted to slam people and tell them to
Right.
F off.
That's funny. That's great. Do you
Yeah.
keep up with today's product?
Sure, yeah, you know, and for a while I kind of did a shift. I was watching a lot of AEW a couple years ago. Now I've shifted back and I'm watching more of WWE. But I'll tell you, they might lose me with Netflix because the amount of commercials they're hitting on Raw. I don't know if it's because I got the cheap account and I gotta bump it up or something. I
Yep.
gotta wait till it's done and I'm back to fast forwarding like I did on DVR because it's too many.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know if that's TKO or who, but just a lot of
Well,
that. But
if you
I'm
go and
dig-
watch it, if you go and watch Monday Night Raw on Netflix, once it's over with, you hardly have any commercials.
Ben, yeah, and you could forward and
Right.
stuff, which
Yep.
is
Yep.
good.
Yep.
Where you can't really do that in some streaming platforms with other stuff. You can't fast forward through the commercials. You can do that with Netflix, I believe. But I mean, yeah, I'm watching WWE. I'm amused at the Ron Killings thing going on now. I thought it was neat that they had gone through when the belt. The
Well, Kenny, I lost you. You there?
Well,
Oh, there you
that's
are.
bad. Someone's calling me while I'm talking
Yep.
to
Yep. That's
you.
right.
My
Ryan
favorite thing
Killing.
is the John Cena heel stuff right now. That's
Yeah.
my ultimate favorite. And some people hate that. I think it's great. I think it's perfect. I
Yeah.
really like it. I think it's a great ending for his career.
Awesome. Well, Kenny, no, you must have got another phone call. He'll be back in a second. Live. Live. Never know what's going to happen. Well, guys, hopefully he'll make it back. Thank you for joining us tonight. Uh, love talking to Kenny. Very interesting stuff. But we will be back tomorrow night to do the recap of the 4 hour AEW Dynamite. Well, it's Dynamite and Collision. We'll be doing a recap of that. And as well, tomorrow also, Darla Staggs will be on the podcast. I am so excited about that. Darla is a phenomenal lady. She was very good friends with Hot Stuff Eddie Gilbert. She has her hand in the Cauliflower Alley Club, uh, which helps so many different professional wrestlers in need. So, check us out with that. Subscribe to the podcast. I hope you guys have a great rest of your week. Have a great weekend. And again, subscribe to our podcast. Check us out tomorrow as we do the review of AEW Dynamite. And join us as I have Darla Skaggs on the podcast. Until then, you all have a great night.